We are the third line from the bottom. I'm Menvav and Ralph. Rav Shem Ava Bar Barchanos and Barka said the following Maisa over. Bar Kaparo trained Talmidoi. Bar Kaparo has two students. Nisarchu Eitzel Balbais. They were guessed by a certain Balabas. Ba'adim Pundaka. Or there's another girsa which says that they were guests in a certain motel, the Barkasa, in the city of Barkasa. Api Kumeon. So he brought in front of them Pargon, that's chicken, Vachunya, two different interpretations here, which make a major difference. Moshe says Achunya are prunes. But most of the Mefarshim say that achunya are not prunes, but rather are a form of grass. Achu, it's a form of grass. It's kind of I guess sprouts would be a similar thing to achunya. The kaflutin, and kaflutin are cabbage, which are bona fide vegetables. And that is a discussion. Now, what discussion here also is a question. How to learn their discussion. According to the Bnei Moshe, the discussion is which bracha is the best bracha to make here. Now you have, if it's according to Bnei Moshe, was shakol for the chicken, ha'et for the prunes, and adama for the cabbage. According, however, to the most mefarshim, you had shakol for the chicken. The achunya is a question what bracha to make, because it might be considered to be a vegetable, in which case it's adama. It might be considered to be a shakol because it's only a grass, so it's not really a vegetable. It might not require bracha at all because it could be considered as being tafel. In other words, you're not going to eat grass by itself. It's going to come kind of like an herb or like a accompaniment to the other food. The topping, right? So the question was, which bracha to make, either because we want to make a bracha which is going to be inclusive, or because we want to make a bracha which is going to exempt that which is tafel to the others. Okay? So that's what the shaila is. Amru, they said, so we started discussing the varach hakafluta. Maybe we should make a bracha on the cabbage. Du patar achnaisa. Well, that'll pater up the prunes, if they're prunes, because Adama includes our eights, right?
Doesn't eights have a higher level?
Eights has a higher level, but according to Bnei Moshe, the shaila is which bracha is going to include which others, right? So it'll pater up the prunes. The low pater parkisa, but it's not going to pater up the chicken, because the chicken is shakol, so it's not included in Adama. According to most Mefarshim, again, well, the way to explain it is that if we make a bracha on Adama, on the cabbage, then the grass will be tafel to the cabbage. That's okay. That'll work. However, that still is not going to take care of the chicken, right? Nevarach al achunaisa. If we make a bracha on the achunaisa, lo pater lo deim lo deim. So according to Bnei Moshe, obviously to make a bracha on the prunes, it ain't going to do any good for anything else, right? Because there are eight, and nothing else is eight. Everything else is either shach or adama. According to the other mefarshim, if you make a bracha on the achunaisa, which is a tafel, so it doesn't pater an ikar, right? Since it itself is only a topping, so it's not going to pater anything else. You can't pater up neither the chicken nor the cabbage, right? Kafat chad. So one of the guys who was there got up. Ubirech al pargisa shakul. He thought he was a big chacham. He said, "I'm going to make a shakul on the chicken, and that'll pater everything." So according to Bnei Moshe, of course it paters everything, right? Because shakul is all inclusive, right? It includes the eights, includes adama. According to the other mefarshim, so he said the grass is it even paters the grass because the grass is tafel to the chicken also, right? It's tafel to the chicken, right? Difficult. It's topping for the chicken. That's it's going to be the Gemara is going to reject that svara, but the Gemara says it's a topping for the chicken, and also it's of course shakul is an inclusive bracha for the cabbage anyway. So his friend started laughing at him. the other guy was there. One of the other guys was there, started laughing at him. So one of the reasons why he was laughing at him, obviously, would be, according to Pnei Moshe, that sha'akol might include everything, but it's not a good bracha to make because it's only b'di'evet on the eitz, and it's only b'di'evet on the hadama, right? According to everybody else. So he started laughing at him because perhaps, as you said, the toppings are not bottled to the chicken, so you don't solve any problems that way. Amalei bar Kaporan said, Lo lezeh gorgiron. Don't think only this guy is at fault because he is so hungry that he's willing to let slip the issue of the proper brachas. Elucha lo glagon. But I'm upset at you also because you're a scoffer. Because it's not nice what you did to make fun of him. Zeh begar garnuso. He did something bad because he was hungry. Atah lama liglakta. Why did you scoff at him? Okay, so he gave mussar to that fellow, to the scoffer. Now he gave mussar to the fellow who jumped to make the bracha and eat. Lezeh amar, to the first guy he said, Chacham ein kan. There's no wise man here. Zaken ein kan. There's no elder. Why didn't you ask me before you started eating? Amru, and they said that lo yatsa shnosan ad shemesu. Neither of them completed that year. They died within a year. So it seems like an awful big punishment for having made the wrong bracha. But I guess he had to have been there, see what it was. Rabbi Yisrael said, all right, fine. Hazlin trained. These two guys kicked the bucket. For lo shemim no klum. But yet we haven't heard what the halacha is. Okay, what good does it do if they die? Now we still have to know what the halacha is. Bar Kapoor didn't tell us what to do in this situation.
Have a sandwich and make a motzi.
Right. Ma'ikadain, what's the halacha here? Mistabra, so it makes sense to say that mevorach al kafluta. You make a bracha on the kafluta, in other words, on the cabbage. Shakon li'ebid varo tfeilo lo, and then you make then the shakon li'ebid varo. You're going to have to make on the. I'm going to explain according to most portion first. According to Pnei Moshe, it's difficult a little bit. What do you do with the prunes? The prunes should be first, right? All right, and they should be mentioned. So, nonetheless, the Pnei Moshe says, no, this is talking about what the b'di'evet would be. In other words, if you made hadama on the cabbage first, that would include the prunes, and then all you have to make is another shackle and the chicken. That's what Pnei Moshe learns, but that's difficult because it seems that there's no reason to leave out the heights. So therefore the other mefarshim say, like the Mashbiach and the Ritbaz and others. So what it means is that, of course, it's not talking about prunes; it's talking about the grass. So the grass, we don't know what bracha to make on it. Therefore, we make hadama on the cabbage. We make shahakol on the chicken. And then, no matter what, the grass is tafel to one of the two. One of them, it's either, if it's tafel to the cabbage, and then it's good with the hadama. If it's not tafel to the cabbage, requires its own bracha, you still made hadama, right? If it's not suitable to make hadama because it's only grass, so you eat it with the shahakol. So that's the general halacha. Whenever you have a case where you mesubak which bracha to make, so you take a couple of other things which require brachas, and you make those brachas, and then you say on this third thing which you're unsure. Okay? All right, let's go on. Something which doesn't grow from the ground. Omer shakol ni'ebit varo. Make a shakol. Al chometz on vinegar. Val gubai on locusts. Val novlos. Those are unripe fruit which fell from the tree. Omer, you say shakol ni'ebit varo. Rav Yehuda Omer kol shemin klola, anything which is a curse, such as locusts or vinegar if it's your wine which went bad, or unripe fruit if it's your fruit which is not coming to term. So aim of vachlo if you don't make a bracha on it altogether.
Even though you're getting hanoah out of it.
Even though you get hanoah out of it, yes. Still, since it's a klola, you couldn't make a bracha on it. Hirch mitzieno. Now, if your wine turned vinegary, omer barak dayna emes. When you find out, you make a dayna emes. Balochlo, when you come to eat it, omer shakol ni'ebit varo. So it's like Rabbana, right? In other words, yes, it's true, you're mourning about what happened. So you make 2 brachas, tain emes, and when you have it, you make a shakol, right? Because after all, it's vinegar, right? It's good for Pesach. Raw guvai. Similarly, if you see the locust eating your field, Omer baruch tain emes. But doesn't mean you shouldn't eat them. When you eat them, Omer shakol ni'ebid varo. Raw novel shenashu. When you see that your trees are shedding unripe fruit, Omer baruch tain emes. But however, when you come to eat them, Omer baruch shakol ni'ebid varo. Okay. Hayil fanav minim harbe. You got many different types of food in front of you. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Im yesh b'neim min shiva." If one of them is from the shiva saminim, all of whom mevarich, you make the bracha on that one. The chachamim no, alei man shiur. So you can make a bracha whichever one you want. Now, of course, we paskin like, as you know, we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, right? That you make on the shiva saminim first. However, we're going to see that that's the Mishnah has to be explained. It's not so simple what the Mishnah is talking about, and why we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda and not like Chachamim. And that's what we'll see anymore.
This was in the Bible also.
Yeah, all these Mishnah, all Mishnayos are in the common, right? All Mishnayos are common. Go to anything worse, which are different. Well, sometimes they're different to the Mishnayos, but much more rarely. Rabbi Shimon Levi Omer, Ma Pligon, Rabbi Yehuda Rabbanan. Rabbi Shimon Levi says, when do they argue, Rabbi and Rabbanan? Kshaya b'daitu lecho pas. We had a mind to eat bread. Avalein b'daitu lecho pas, but he didn't have in mind to eat bread. Kol amamoide, everybody concedes. Shim yesh b'neim min shiva, that if there is among the fruit which he's eating a type of shiva samin, something from the 7 species for which Eretz Yisrael is praised, all of whom mevarich. On that he makes the bracha. Now, before we go further, Rabbi Shimon Levi is saying a fascinating thing. Shimon Levi is saying their derech was to eat, in fact, their vorspeis, their first the appetizer before first course or appetizer before they made hamotzi. They were yoyt since it was intended to be part and parcel of the meal, so then they can make a birkas yotze at the end with birkas hamosa. So then says the Gemara, Rabbi Yeshua and Levi Rabbanan only argued, your Yehuda, the Rabbanan only argued when he had in mind afterwards to eat bread. In that case, so Rabbi Yehuda says, doesn't matter, you eat first Shiva Saminim anyway. Rabbanan say it doesn't matter. Since the bracha achrona for all these things are going to be benching, they lose their significance. Because the Rabbanan holds, as the Gemara will tell us later on, a very lumdish thing. What gives the Shiva Saminim their elevated status vis-a-vis bracha Rishona? It's the fact that they have a more significant bracha achrona. You make al michya or al eitz or al gofen, all those brachas achronos. So, because they have an elevated bracha achrona, that's why they're more significant bracha rishona. Take that away if you're going to bench anyway. So in that case, it doesn't matter which one you eat first. That's Rabbanan Svara. However, even Rabbanan agreed, Rabbi Yehuda, if you're not going to bench afterwards, i.e. that the Shiva Saminim retain their higher character, so in that case, even Rabbanan agreed that Shiva Saminim comes first. You see that? So that's what Rabbi Shimon Levi says. Let's see it in the slide again. Or Mapli and Rabbi Rabbanan, when Rabbi and Rabbanan argue, Shabadaitu lecho pas. If he had a mind to eat bread, so anyway it's going to bench. Avlein b'daitu lecho pas, but if he doesn't have a mind to eat bread, everybody agrees. Shim yesh b'nei min shiva, that if there's one that Shiva Saminim there, all of whom mevarech, on that he makes the bracha. Rabbi Abba said, tzorich levarech basof. Now, Rabbi Abba argues Rabbi Shimon Levi in a specific point, which Gemara is going to elucidate in a minute, but let's bring it out anyway first. Rabbi Abba says, if you have the appetizer before you have the meal, you have to make a bracha achrona on the appetizer. Rabbi Shimon Levi holds if the appetizer, even the appetizer comes before you wash. So be a very big nafkamina according to Rabbi Shimon Levi. Interesting, I never thought of this before. We don't paskin like this Yerushalmi, but Rabbi Shimon Levi, then if you were the smorgasbord or chasna, You wouldn't make a bracha achrona on the smorgasbord, because those are the appetizers for the main meal. I mean, theoretically speaking, obviously all sorts of other factors, such as the same room, interruption of the ceremony, all those kinds of things. But hypothetically, you can put yourself in the situation where you wouldn't make a bracha achrona after you ate the smorgasbord, right? As an appetizer for the meal.
Let's say for now, when you make kiddush, though, you don't say alates afterwards.
That's true, but that would be a special din in kiddush. You're right. We're gonna hypothetically that should be a riot for Bishop and Levi.
Right.
Rabbi Abba would say that kiddush is a unique halacha. I mean, I don't know if it's explicit anywhere, but one could make that distinction because kiddush is affixed to the meal in a way which nothing else is affixed to the meal. But in any event, so it says Gemara, Rabbi Abba tzarich levarich b'sof. You have to make a bracha at the end after you eat the appetizer. Now, the way we paskin in this halacha is, it doesn't matter when you make the bracha achrona. If you have seich vase before the meal, you have a grapefruit, and then you wash. So you can say the bracha nefashos before you wash, during the meal, or after the meal, because the bracha nefashos is distinct from the meal because it's on the grapefruit which you had beforehand. That's where we paskin, like Rabbi Abba.
Doesn't the benching include?
No, because you had that's like Rabbi Shubin Levi. That's the machlokas. Like Rabbi Shubin Levi, benching includes the grapefruit you had before you wash.
Right.
Now like Rabbi Abba. We pass like Rabbi Abba. Tzarich levarich. You have to make a separate bracha on the appetizer which you had beforehand. Okay. So it says the Gemara, I'm Rabbi Abba tzarich levarich b'sof. I'm Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi said, Hadad Rabbi Ba, that which Rabbi Abba said. Pleaded Rabbi Shimon Levi. It's obviously arguing Rabbi Shimon Levi. So Rabbi Shimon Levi, Rabbi Shimon Levi said, "Ma pleading Rabban Rabbi the when Rabban Rabbi the argue, Rabban argue b'shaya b'daito lecha pas." We had in mind afterwards keep red, right? Because then Rabban holds there's no hierarchy, and Rabbi the holds there's still a hierarchy. I believe in b'daito lecha pas, but it sounds clear that if he had no intention of eating bread, everybody agrees that if there's Shiva Saminim, you make the bracha on Shiva Saminim first. Why? Because it all depends on whether there is the unique bracha achrona or not. Umar Rabbi Abba came along and said, that regardless, you have to make a bracha at the end. So if that's the case, you would always have to put the Shiva Saminim first, according to Rabbi Abba. If according to Rabbi Abba, let me make that more clear. According to Rabbi Abba says you always have to make a bracha achrona, regardless of when you have the appetizer. I mean, not regardless. Since you had the appetizer before the meal, you have to make a bracha achrona regardless. So therefore, Rabbi Abba could not agree to Rabbi Shimon Levi's statement that Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda only argued in a case where there is no bracha achrona for the appetizer. So then the Shiva Saminim according to Rabbanan lose their significance because there's no such case according to Rabbi Abba. According to Rabbi Abba, the appetizer always requires its own independent bracha. Okay, so says the Gemara. Lo birich. What happens if you didn't make a bracha achrona on the grapefruit? You're supposed to, you didn't. So says Gemara again. This is Yerushalmi. We don't pass like this Yerushalmi, but the Yerushalmi says lo birich nasa tefela. B'diavad yiratzu with birkas hamosa. If you didn't make the bracha achrona after the grapefruit, and he went ahead and he ate the meal, then birkas hamosa is sufficient. Titznin on Tamon, as you learned over there. Now this is an amazing application of the following statement. Kol shu ikar v'imo tefela, v'varech al ikar u'paiter satfela. Anytime you have a primary substance as secondary substance, you make the bracha on the primary substance, and that bothers up the secondary substance. By us, in the Bavli, that statement is used on bracha rishona. That if you have an ikar and a tafel, say you have chveis, you have rice and tomato sauce. right? So the rice is the ikr and the tomato sauce is the tafel. So you make a mazonos on the rice, like our minhag. You don't make a bracha on the tomato sauce, right? That's an ikr and tafel. But here in the Yerushalmi, ikr and tafel is being used on bracha achrona. It's saying if you have the ikr, the benching, so then the tafel, the bracha of B'rei Nefashos or Alamichi or whatever it is exempted by the benching. So that's a unique application. We don't baskin that way. We baskin again. If you have the grapefruit before the meal, you have to make a B'rei Nefashos regardless. It floats separately. But it's clear here for the Yerushalmi. Yerushalmi holds not that way. The Chatchilu, you should make the B'rei Nefashos before you wash. If b'diavad you did not, then the benching works for both. Okay? Says the Gemara, Hadar Grizmita. There was a certain grizmita, which is a dish which we don't know exactly what it is, but it's made with turmus, which is a type of legume, and it's made with a whole bunch of spices, herbs, and toppings, some of which come from Shiva Saminim. So it's a very elaborate dish, and it's made from the base is legumes, that's the primary component, and all sorts of significant spices and other ingredients added in. And it comes as a dessert normally. It comes normally as a dessert. So it gets its own bracha, right? So it's a dessert. Desserts get their own bracha. However, what bracha do you make? It has Shiva Saminim in it. Nonetheless, Rabbi Yami said, Mevorech ala turmusa. You make the bracha on the legume. The Shiva Saminim in the toppings of that legume. Amar Rabbi Levi said, Al Shein, this fulfills that which it says, Al Tigzol Dal Kidalu. Don't steal the poor person just because he's poor. But it's true, it's only a lowly legume. It's not in the Shiva Saminim, but it's the primary component of this dish. So here kicks in the principle again, whenever there's an ikar v'tafel, you make the bracha on the ikar, not on the tafel. Okay? Says the Gemara, Ad Kedun, that's only true b'shiesh b'daito lechol pas. Now, we're going back to the original halacha, which Rabbi Shimon Levi brought down at the beginning. Ad Kedun, Rabbi Shimon Levi said, when do we have machlokes? B'shiesh b'daito lechol pas. Right? When he had in mind to eat bread. Then there's machlokes Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda what to do. Whether you have to go by Shiva Saminim anyway, or whether you get to put whatever you want first as a preference. However, aloya b'daito lechol pas. If you didn't have mighty bread, lo b'da. We said in this, there's no disagreement. Everybody agrees that in that case the Shiva Saminim go first. Okay, let's bring a Maisa like this. Concerning this, Ram Gamliel Zuga, Ram Gamliel the barber. This is not our Ram Gamliel. Normally, Ram Gamliel the Nasi. Here's our Gamliel the barber. So he went to a meal in the house of Rabbi Yanai. Chameson Nasvin Zesa. He saw them taking a olive, umevarchin lefanov ulachrov, and they made a bracha before and after the olive. Actually, it doesn't say after. I was reading from the Pnei Moshe by accident. Even though they had in mind to make a motzi right afterwards, so they took an olive, they made a bracha at the beginning, bracha at the end, then they washed immediately, and they made a motzi and they benched. What's wrong with this picture? Rabbi Shimon Levi, you don't do this. Rabbi Shimon Levi, there's no wash. Any place you're going to eat bread, you don't make a bracha achrona. That's Rabbi Abba holds you need a bracha achrona on the olives. Rabbi Shimon Levi, you don't make a bracha achrona. Says the Gemara, Amar, Ram Gamliel the barber said to them, Armalon v'avdin kedain? You're doing like this? How can you do this? That's like Rabbi Shua. That's not like Rabbi Shimon Levi. Rabbi Shimon Levi, you don't make a bracha on the olives. You make only not a bracha achrona on the olives, only a bracha rishona.
So maybe they had no intention to eat the bread.
No, obviously that's the case. Otherwise, the whole Maisa doesn't make any sense. Rabbi Zira Shalach. Rabbi Zira sent us the following story. Shal Rabbi. I'm sorry, he didn't say the story. Okay, Rabbi Zira Shalach Shol Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman. Rabbi Zira sent a message of a query to Shmuel bar Nachman. Rav Kahana b'shem Rabbi Yavina. Now the something here is messed up. You'll see that where the Mashbiach resorts the Gemara here. All the Mefarshim have different difficulties because the Gemara seems to be out of order. Not that anything is hard here. Just it looks like somebody picked up the lines, threw them up in the air, and let them fall as they might. So we'll just plot our way through them. Rav Zir Shal Rav Shmuel Rav Nachman. Rav Kana b'shem Ravina said, Kol ha'moedes sheyesh b'neihem mimin shiva, olav hu mevarich. Everybody agrees that if there is a min shiva involved, then all of them you make the bracha on that one. Rabbi Zira said, V'yoyus. That's good. Now, this line seems to be out of place because if Rabbi Zira is asking the question, Rabbi Zira can't say that's good, right? Well, this seems to be clear. What we're saying is that if there's no bread involved in the table, so halacha, if there's no bread on the table, then of course min shiva comes first. How do we know that's true? Now the next line doesn't make any sense in context. From that which I saw, the rabbis going up to eat the Rosh Chodesh Suda and Shul, and they had a special minute to eat every Rosh Chodesh. V'achlin anvin, and they would eat grapes. V'lo mevarchim b'soifa, and they wouldn't make a bracha achroina. V'lo b'sheyesh b'daito lechobas, and we're not talking about a case where there was bread in front of them, which is a very nice proof for Rabbi Shimon Levi's halacha. But it's nothing to do with whether you make min shiva first, because all he saw is that they ate grapes. From this Meiser, don't say that they made a bracha on grapes over anything else. It says that they made a bracha on grapes and didn't make a bracha achrona because they were continuing to eat bread afterwards. So this Meiser is not proving Rabbi Zira's previous point, but rather it's proving, which is that when there's no bread on the table, everybody agrees that min shiva goes first. But it's proving the point on Amud Aleph, which is that wherever you're going to eat bread immediately after the appetizer, they don't make a bracha on the appetizer. You rely on the bracha achrona of the bench. Okay, so the two separate things here which have been thrown together because of some Gersa mistake. Going back to the issue with which Rabbi Zira began, minim shiva, and this is probably the actual question which Rabbi Zira sent. If you had several types of minim shiva, and we all agree that if there's one, let's say there's dates versus versus chicken, then the dates come first. But what happens if you have dates and pomegranates and wheat on the table? Then which comes first? So Talmud Amrin. So the answer to that was that they said over there in Bavel, everything which comes first in the pasuk, koydem lebracha, goes first for bracha. And if it's next to the word oretz, it comes first. So it says eretz zavas, eretz chita usara v'gefen uteina v'rimon, eretz zeishemen udvash. Right. So you go by the order, but not straight through the pasuk, but rather the word eretz interrupts. So it's first chita, then not saor afterwards is the next one, but chita then zayis, because zayis comes after the second word oretz. So it's chita, zayis, saora. Now we go after the second word oretz. What's the second word after the second word oretz? Tamarim, and then gefen teina rimo. Okay, you understand what we're doing it? It's the second oretz means as if to start again. So it's oretz, oretz, then the first thing after the first oretz, then the first thing after the second oretz, then the second thing after the first oretz, then the second thing after the second oretz, and then the rest of it afterwards. Okay, and that's the way it works. What time is it now?
8:40.
If you make a bracha on wine before you eat, it helps for the wine. It helps for the wine after you eat. Now, in other words, they had back then a minhag to drink before the meal, to drink after the meal, but not in the meal. So the Bar Biakov before the meal patters the wine after the meal. Okay?
Do you pass that way?
Yes.
If you're benching on the coast, don't you make a bracha?
Yeah, but that's because of the coast. And that's because of benching a coast, not because of the new wine. Okay? But if you make a bracha on the on parperes, which is a type of dessert, before here it's not an appetizer, but rather dessert. This is an appetizer. You make a bracha on an appetizer before you eat, before you make hamotzi. The poteres parperes shachar mozon. It works also for the parperes, the dessert, which is after the.
So the same food was used as a appetizer?
No, whatever. If it's the same type, same category, eitz or adam, or whatever the case may be. Birei chalapas, pater saperperes. You made a bracha on bread, so it exempts the dessert. Now, this dessert, most of the Mefarshim say, is a dessert made out of flour, and this is true. This is the way paskin. Even though most of us make a bracha on desserts, we don't make a bracha on dessert when that dessert is cake. You don't make a mazonos on desserts. Ha'etz, ha'adama, even charcoal on ice cream. But you don't make a mazonos when you have cake for desserts.
I thought you do if you didn't know that you were going to have cake for dessert.
No, assuming that you knew you were going to have a dessert, so you don't make any, not mazonos. Because this is halacha. Bircha ala pas potes parperes. Bircha parperes, however, make a bracha even on a cake, this appetizer, lo pater sapas, it doesn't exempt the bread. Beis Shammai omrim, afla ma'asek der. Beis Shammai says that just like a parperes, a cake, does not pater a bread, so too it doesn't pater up a ma'asek der, which are noodles, or any other kugel, something like that. In other words, cake or any other type of mazonos, dessert or snack type substance doesn't pater any other type of mazonos. We don't pass that way. We pass that the mazonos cake does not pater our bread, but it does pater up any other type of mazonos food which is being eaten in the meal.
So if you have like a kugel for dessert,
you don't make a bracha on it, right? Okay. Amar Chisda said, "Lo teninon." We only said here, "El birach hayan shelifnei hamazon." If you made a bracha on the wine before you ate, pater san shalach hamazon exempts the wine after you eat. Avol im birach hayan shebetoch hamazon. But if you made a bracha on wine during the meal, lo pater sayan shalach hamazon, it doesn't work on the wine after the meal. Talmud Armin in Bavel they said, "Afilu birach hayan shelifnei hamazon." If you made a bracha on the wine which is within the meal, lo potes hayayin. Shalifnei hamazon, which is before the meal, lo potes hayayin shalachar hamazon, that it doesn't work for the wine after the meal. How can you say this? That's in direct contradiction to our Mishnah. But in our Mishnah, if you made a bracha on the wine before the meal, potes hayayin shalachar hamazon works for after the meal. So how can you argue in our Mishnah? Says Moravuna, Rabbi Yishuv, and Levi both said, they want to say, when does our Mishnah work? Only in a case when you're drinking kunditin wine. Kunditin is wine which has a lot of it's like a sangria, has a lot of different flavors in it, from ground peppers and other stuff like that. It's not just pure wine. So therefore it's like a food. Since it's like a food, it's significant to carry over through the meal from before till afterwards. Any other kind of wine, if you made a bracha on it before the meal, that bracha does not carry till after the meal. The meal is an interruption. But here, since it's a food, it's a wine, which in and of itself is a quasi food stuff, so the meal is not an interruption in the bracha on the wine. Okay, that's his interpretation. Rav Charana, the other one of these two said, we don't know who said what, but one of the pair said it's kunditin, and the other one of the pair said kahadin deshasi chamor besar bilne. This is like a person who drinks wine after the bilne. So after bilne means I forgot. Yeah, this is like somebody who, after he went to the bathhouse. Bilnei Valon is the bathhouse attendant. So somebody who drank wine after he went to the bathhouse. Since it's after he went to the bathhouse, again after he went to the bathhouse, although the wine itself was the same wine, they were accustomed to drink a lot of wine. So therefore, it would be assumed that he would drink before and after the meal. So since it was before and after the meal, since it was, how should I put it? They were more koveya. They made more of a I'm not sure how to translate kviyus. More more designated, more designated, or a qualitatively more designated, I guess, but more designated wine drinking. In other words, it was more when you normally drink wine before the meal. It doesn't necessarily follow your drink after the meal. Even if you tend to do so, it's still like a new episode. But when you're designating yourself and devoting yourself to the drinking of wine because you just came out from the bathhouse, so therefore that carries over from before the meal to after the meal. The kviyus is so great that it carries over from one to the other.
What's understood that you come out of the bathhouse, you're thirsty.
Right, so obviously you're going to drink more. And you're hot, so obviously
before you even go in, you knew that you would come out.
Right, so it's more of a kviyus. That's basically what it boils down to. Rabbi Chelbo and Rav Huna Rav, B'Shem Rabbi Chia Ruba, said, Pasaba b'kistin achar hamazon, a pasaba b'kistin, a piece of bread which is not a piece of bread, a cake. Right, pasaba b'kistin, it's not exactly true. We don't know exactly what a pasaba b'kistin is, whether it's a cake be virtue of the fact that it has a filling, or because of the way it's made. Whatever the case may be, it's mazonos, not a motzi. So he had mazonos, achra mazon, and he ate it after the meal. Tuna bracha lefaneh ulachrea. You have to have a bracha before and after. Now, this is a new case. This even though he didn't bench yet. It's before benching. It's your dessert. You're having cake for dessert. It's chocolate cake. You have to make mazonos, ala michya, and then bench. You have to make both. It's like completely out of the meal. Completely separated, a vent into itself. No. Rabbi Yami said, Rabbi Yochanan Polik. Rabbi Yochanan argues in this. Rabbi Chizkiah said to Rabbi Chizkiah, Bamel Polik, what's he, or when's he argue? Maybe it's he only argues when he ate something similar to that cake in the middle of your meal. Whereas when doesn't the cake for dessert require some bracha? When you already had something earlier in the meal, which is also mizonos, also pasaba b'kistin. Perhaps that's the only time Rabbi Yochanan argues. Amalei, no. So he said, no. Even if he didn't eat from that type of cake in the middle of the meal, still he doesn't have to make a bracha, a separate bracha on the cake at the end of the meal. And this is the way we paskin. We paskin cake does not require some bracha as long as you made a motzi. As Rabbi Chaga B'Shem Rabbi Ziran said the same thing. I feel still you don't make a bracha on the cake. Rabbi Chanina bar Sisvei. Rabbi Chanina bar Sisvei. Chanina bar Sisvei said, "Having Elaine, there were certain individuals, the Neshayo, whose wives, I guess they were in the base medrash, and their wives would be Meshalchin land would send to them Meshalchin land. They would send. Should be lehen, I guess, not late. So they would send naklavosan. They would send something called naklavosan. Now naklavosan seems to be a sort of cake. And he's trying to bring a raya against Rabbi Yochanan. It says, V'avashavukla misar mizone, he left them for after the meal, u'mevarach le'en tchilu b'sof. And he make a bracha upon them, both at the beginning and at the end. So, one could learn, like I just said, that it's a raya against Rabbi Yochanan, but on the other hand, one could learn that it's a raya for Rabbi Yochanan. In order to be Yotzi, the question of brachos, he would leave them. The way to say is that not they made a bracha on him at the beginning and at the end and in the middle of the meal, but he left it for after the meal and after benching, in order then to make a separate bracha, mizonon as a separate alamichya. Or it's in the meal, he thought, was afraid maybe a little like Rabbi Yochanan, and therefore he didn't want to make separate bracha on them. So he left them for after the meal to be able to make a separate bracha on them. Okay, Rav Huna achal tamin in piste. Rav Huna used to eat his dates with bread, in order not to have to make a separate bracha. Because if you eat it with the bread, so they don't make a separate bracha. This is true about any appetizer or dessert. If you eat it with bread, you don't make a separate bracha on it. Amalei Rav Chia Barashi, so Rav Chia Barashi said, Poligato Rabach. I'm sorry, Poligato Rabach, you're arguing on your Rebbe? Shovkan, who was his Rebbe? I guess Rav Chisda, yes. No, it's Rav Chisda, who's his Rebbe? No, Rav Chia Rabbah. Okay, Rav Chia Rabbah. Poligato Rabach, you're arguing your Rebbe? Is it that Shokim B'sar Mazoinach? In other words, don't worry about making a separate bracha. Leave them for dessert. Van mevarach le'en tchilu b'sof. You make a bracha and then both begin, and within you make a eitz and ala eitz on them. Why are you doing this? Why are you eating them with bread in order to avoid the bracha? Just make the bracha. What's the problem? Amalei said that this is it's like a jelly, like preserves. In other words, the way I eat my meal is by spreading the dates, or eating the dates together with the bread. It gives a different flavor to the bread. So I guess you could call it ikar and tafel. That's right. It makes the date tafel to the bread. And that's why he doesn't make a bracha on them. But he wasn't doing it to be yaitz in the safek brachos. He was doing it because he enjoyed eating it that way. So that was okay. Okay? So it says the Gemara, Rabbi Yonah of Rabbi Yasai, Rabbi Yonah, Rabbi Yossi. Sokin l'mishtei say Rabbi Chanina and Snoye. They went to the chasta of Rabbi Chanina and Snoye. So Api Kumen Pasabal Kisses, so they gave them cake lachar moza, and after the meal was over. So it was before benching, after the meal was over. So what are they supposed to do? They said Nishmu Kufana. Let's leave that which you learned from the Ma'amoroim. The Nesulon Masnisa. Let's learn out for a brisa. What does the brisa say? The Tanya learned Rabbi Mona Belmar Bishum Rabbi Yehuda, who said name Rabbi Yehuda. Shamar Bishum Rabbi Yehuda, the name Rabbi Yehuda. Pasa Bob Kisnin Lachar Amozo, a Pasa Bob Kisnin cake, which comes after the meal, to a bracha, even though it's before benching, requires a bracha lefaneh before and ulachareh. So this is quite clear. You do need a bracha, but this is stated in the name of individuals: Rabbi Mano, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Sagli. Mikei Amre, they said, Mikei van dahen yichidoi, since they're individuals, it must be the Rabbanan Pligi Lave, as the Rabbanan argue on them. On Nevid ke Rabbanan, we're going to do like Rabbanan. So what did they do? They didn't make a bracha on it. Since it's cake, you're yotzi with the bread, you don't make a separate bracha on the cake. Amar Marinus said, Bei Rabbi Yeshua, in the house of Rabbi Yeshua. Ain dachlu garmize. There's a certain individual who ate garmize. Garizme. Garizme was that legume dish, which we had back here on Mem Zayin with Olive. That was called garizmita. So it's the same thing. Garizme. He ate garizme, bisolis, and cake. Something made out of flour. So he ate the legume dish and the flour. So he said the legumes pater the stuff which is mixed into them, even though Shiva Saminim. However, even though he makes a bracha on the grizmita, b'saifa at the end, lo pater sulta. It doesn't pater up the cake, and not just at the end, but even in the beginning. The Pnei Moshe points out. In other words, the ikar and tafel in the grizmita itself, it says you make the bracha on the legume and not on the shivas haminim. Neither bracha achrona nor bracha rishona, separate and distinct, does not apply to cake. The cake requires its own bracha. Okay.
And the cake comes first. That bracha comes.
Well,
before the shivas. Before the legumes.
Yeah,
sure.
it comes before the legumes. Makabe so says Gemara. Wait a minute. Makabe Shammai. At first, Gemara says that going like Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai is the one who says that the desserts don't pater even. Well, that we said Parperes doesn't exempt the Maisa Kedera, which sounds like Mizonos don't pater Mizonos. But the Gemara understands that at this point that the dessert does not pater cake. So this is this is like Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai is the one that Mishnah said dessert doesn't pater up cake. We hold it must be by inference that dessert does pater up cake. So here too, make the bracha on the garzima and grizma, and you won't have to make a bracha on the cake. Says Mara Maka Beis Shammai. The Beis Shammai Oimer, because it's Beis Shammai that Mishnah said Haflu Maisa Kedera, that even that cake, that parperis, that desserts don't exempt any mizonos. As Mara Rabbi Yosef said, no, Divrei Koli. Everybody agrees. In this, everybody agrees. How so? If you make a bracha on bread, pater parperis, that works for cake and maisa kedera and noodles as well. K'divrei Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai lo pater es maisa kedera. Beis Shammai says that this is an interpretation of the Mishnah that bread does not pater noodles, any other main dish made out of mizonos. If you made a bracha on a dessert first, everybody agrees that does not exempt bread, nor does it exempt maisa kedera, nor does it exempt any other type of mizonos as well. Now, as the Gemara is I glassed over it a little bit because the Gemara is really unclear as to whether parperis means a dessert with flour or without flour. So I gave it the way I understand it. I'm just saying this for truth and advertising purposes. But it's a little bit difficult to interpret the Gemara whether parperis means with flour, without flour. But the bottom line is, the way we paskin is that all mazonos pater is all mazonos. No, nothing else paters mizonos. Even if the mizonos is a secondary part of your dessert, you still have to make a separate mizonos on it. One exception if it's a bona fide tofel, such as if you're having herring on a cake, on a tam-tam, in order to eat the herring more conveniently, then you don't make a bracha on the mizonos. But it's just two separate desserts. One dessert does not pater the dessert does not pater the cake. And the havamina really in our Mishnah was to say malchokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel whether one type of cake paters another type of cake. One mizonos paters another mizonos. Beis Shammai said it never does. Beis Hillel says yes, the mizonos does pater another kind of mizonos.
What about, let's say,
what time is it now?
9.
Okay.
What about, let's see, pie a la mode? We have
What is pie a la mode?
Ice cream on a pie or on a cake.
So it's just plop down on the pie.
Yeah,
You have to make.
ice cream on
You have to make two separate brachos.
cake.
You have to make two separate brachos. If you have a cream cake which is cooked, baked together, the cream was baked together with the cake, then you make one bracha. But there it's just plopped down on top. So that's not so. Plopped is not an elegant word to use for food, but
We're going to have Mario.
we're supposed to have 9:15. It's supposed to have. Okay. I'm just about finished, Mr. Berenson.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you, Bertha. Detroit. All right, I have two more lines to do. You want to open up a Gemara for 2 lines? It can't hurt. We'll stop at the Mishnah tonight. I remember Chesam base.
You're not going to finish the film.
There's no stopping point in the middle. Yeah, we'll do the mission. Rabbi Abba Braid, the Rav Papa boy, he asked the question. Ahain, concerning an individual, the Achal Silas, he ate cake, Uvadaite Mechol Pita, wants to eat bread afterwards. Mao Mevarch al Suta b'Seifa. Does he make a bracha on the cake before he makes birkas, before he washes and eats makes birkas hamazon and makes hamotzi birkas hamazon? Rabbanan the Kesarin Pashila tzarich levarach b'sof. Rabbanan the Kesarin said that he has to make a bracha achrona on the cake. So again, this is where it came before the cake. He had the cake before the meal, and then he was going to eat the meal afterwards. So he has to make a bracha achrona on the cake. Now it sounds to me like this argues in Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, what you said before. We mentioned earlier, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Shita is that whenever you have an appetizer before the meal, before you wash, you have the appetizer before you wash, then you don't make a separate bracha on the appetizer, bracha achrona on the appetizer. Rather, you eat it with benching, right? We said before, back then, the Rabbi Abba argues. Rabbi Abba holds you do make a separate bracha achrona on the appetizer, and then you bench after, then you make wash in the bench.
He eats cake.
What?
Cake is an appetizer?
No, so this is a new thing. Then this is a separate case. The shaila is here if you have a cake, and that's not necessarily cake, solas could be anything.
I'll tell you my shiur.
Yeah. Better be a good one, though. Yeah.
This was, it had to be at a resort. There was a Rabbi Farber. He was the Rosh Hashiva in Eretz Yisrael. Anyway, we made Kiddush there. And he said, let's go out. Because there was a machlekes, but you have to make a bracha for Ramat. We made a bracha for Ramat and we walked out. Then we came back and we washed. You heard?
That's like our Gemara. That's a very good. In other words,
So I'm giving you
he's learning it to suffix. He learned a suffix. Our minig though is to make a bracha. Our minig is to make a bracha achrona. Yeah.
Let's say Shabbos Kiddush. You make Kiddush and you eat your mazonos, and
Right.
then you're going to wash.
Right. So our minig is to make a bracha. However,
There's a machlekes. So he says in order to avoid the problem, you just walk out a little bit, go around the point. and then
right.
you
But that's about. But here he brings out the Aruch HaShulchan, who went through. I wrote a commentary on the Yerushalmi. He says he paskins that in this
You
case.
have his
It's in the back of the big Gemara, so actually. It's called the Mechal Mayim. I think it's in, you don't have it back there, but I think it's back in the big Gemaras. It's a Ger Chassid, a modern fellow. But in any event, the Aruch HaShulchan, I think it's in the back here. I have it in this little book, maybe not. But in any event, the Aruch HaShulchan says a very interesting thing. He says that L'maisa Paskins, if you have cake before the meal, you don't make a bracha on the cake. Birkas Hamazon is good enough. So what about this Maisa? So he learned this Maisa not like the Pnei Moshe. He had in mind that not that he had in mind to eat the cake afterwards, but rather he didn't have in mind to eat the cake afterwards.
He had in mind what?
He had in mind only to eat the cake, not to wash. And that's why the Gemara has a safek, and the Gemara says Tzarich Levarich, that he has to make a bracha after the cake. However, if he had in mind L'maisa, according to Aruch HaShulchan, if he had in mind to eat the cake and then afterwards, so immediately thereafter wash, so then he paskins that he only make a mezonos, al netilas yadayim, hamotzi, and benching, and there's no al michya.
Actually, what's the point about? What's the score?
Excuse me?
If you make a bracha, don't make a bracha.
The question is whether we consider the meal to be part and part. We consider that appetizer or whatever you before the meal goes.
You're talking about...
Yeah, but you had in mind to eat right after the cake to eat to wash. You had in mind right after the cake to wash, so it glides right into washing.
Cake an appetizer?
Sure. Yeah. That's the case here, according to Aruch HaShulchan.
Shabbos morning.
It's not an appetizer.
Don't call it an appetizer, call it a first course, but it glides right into the meal, according to Aruch HaShulchan.
So the question is...
No, I'm just curious. Let me get Taka get a Shulchan Aruch. Maybe we do paskin. My impression is that we don't paskin like this, Rabbi Shub and Levi. That we do make separate brachas. But once we have a couple of minutes tomorrow, we do paskin like the Yerushalmi. The Mishnah Berurah says, at least by Mazonos, he says that v'lo birech ad shebirech birkos hamazon. Oh, this is only by Mazonos, so I don't know about the anything else. He says, but the Evid, if he didn't make no, it depends. He's really he waffles here a little bit. Mishnah Berurah says if he ate the mazonos, this time he ate mazonos before the meal. If he ate it just for pleasure or to satiate your intense hunger, then you have to make a bracha achorna before the meal. If you only, however, b'diavad, if you forgot and you made birkas hamazon, so b'diavad birkas hamazon patters all mazonos. Then you don't have to, you don't make a mazon amichi afterwards. And some say that if your intent was
in the middle of it, there's one source says that in the middle of the meal, you stop and you make a bracha achrona.
Right, but he says not that way. At least not by mazonos.
There is a day on that.
I know.
Does he bring it there?
No, not here. This is all mazonos, but he says, okay, here he brings down everything else. So mazonos, but you're yotze with benching. That's certainly the case. Mazonos is yotze with benching. You're yotze with benching. Now he says, harotza lecho kol netilas yadayim l'suda. You want to eat before you wash. Midvarim shetzorich levarach lehem b'toch hasuda, stuff which you're going to have to make a bracha in the meal. If you wait in the meal, you have to make a bracha, such as an apple. Let me read it.
Before you go on. Let's say...
But you're not going to be able to see it then.
Well, there's not a million anyway.
No, it's coming.
Let's say if he ate mazonas before the meal.
Yes.
Then he had in mind to eat mazonas during the meal.
Then he doesn't make a separate mazonas. Then he doesn't make a separate al-michya.
Then the mazon before the meal patters the mazonas within the meal.
That's right. That's for sure.
So that would...
then you don't make a separate bracha achrona. Okay, now you got to give me. You have to listen in silence for a minute, because otherwise we'll never finish.
What?
You have to keep me quiet for a second.
For 30 seconds.
Before washing, Stuff which were he to have it during the meal, such as a grapefruit. You would have to make up. He has a grapefruit before he washes. Okay? And you have in mind to have a grapefruit after you wash as well. You're going to do both, right? And you want this bracha on the grapefruit, the alates on the grapefruit now, to patter up the grapefruit during the meal. So then, obviously you don't have to make a bracha achrona, because this is all for the meal. However, if you're going to, if you're talking about fruit, you eat before the meal the type of food which you don't have to make a bracha later on during the meal, such as the chveis, eat lettuce or a pickle before the meal, which you don't have to make a bracha on afterwards, right? So he says here, such as a potato or some sort of other type of vegetable. So in that case,
Eat it before the meal?
Yeah, eat it before the meal.
As an appetizer?
Yeah, but it's not a true appetizer.
What?
It's not a true appetizer.
It's a nash.
It's a nash, right? It's potatoes. You eat potatoes before the meal.
He doesn't say an appetizer?
No, it's potatoes. No, he says dafka, not an appetizer.
Oh, not an appetizer.
Not an appetizer. In that case, it definitely needs a bracha achrona. You're not yotzi with any, because it's not at all affiliated with the meal. Okay? Now, if
some say, well, yeah, okay.
now if you eat an appetizer beforehand, so then, in other words, it's something which is takan appetizer, such as he says here, taka, pickle, he says is an appetizer. If you relish, right? Then you don't make a bracha achrona because it's shaykh to the meal. Okay?
Even though you ate it before.
Even though you eat it before the meal, and you're not going to eat anything similar to the meal.
Didn't start until you wash.
Right. But nonetheless, since it was a preparation for the meal, so you have to make you don't have to make a separate bracha achrona for it. And
So that if you had
so that's
kiddush,
it. That's basically it.
So if you had kiddush, you know you're staying for the meal after the kiddush.
Yeah, but then it's not part of the meal. Just a minute. If you had Adarab, it's good. If you had during the kiddush, you had a chveis, chopped liver, right? Because you're hungry, not because you're going to have chopped liver during the meal. It's not an appetizer for the meal, but it's because you're hungry. So in that case, you're not going to make you would have to make a separate bracha achrona on the chopped liver, regardless of whether you benched afterwards, or on the tuna salad, or an egg salad, whatever it is. It's only if it's a grapefruit or a pickle or something like that, which is in order to whet your appetite for later on. So then you don't have to make a separate bracha achrona on it. Okay, so that's the case. All right. If it's a mizonos, you certainly yotzi with benching.
You certainly.
Yotzi with benching, no doubt about
You
it.
don't have to make a bracha achrona?
Right.
Because you said your custom is to make a bracha.
No. So that's what the Aruch HaShulchan said. If you didn't have in mind to eat, if he didn't have in mind, if he ate cake, and at the time he had the cake.
I understood you to say,
Yeah.
if you ate cake, your minhag is to make the bracha achrona. Was that right or wrong?
No, it depends what he had in mind.
Well, you made a blanket statement.
Oh, but now I'm qualified.
Now you can vote.
I have the right to renege.
Okay.
If he ate cake,
Yeah.
right, with the intent to eat immediately afterwards a meal, no bracha achrona. If he ate
Cake.
with the intent to eat the meal immediately
You
afterwards,
knew you were going to eat a meal right after you ate cake.
Even though he's hungry, he's eating the cake.
yes,
He's still,
no bracha achrona.
you know, bracha achrona.
You had the meal right
So
afterwards.
what's the difference if he's eating cake or if eating whatever?
Potatoes,
Yeah.
no difference. Oh, the difference is
Yeah,
the difference is once you
You
benched.
said
No, the difference is once you benched. If then you benched, so it works for the cake, but it doesn't work for the potatoes.
Why not?
Because potatoes are not, if you benched on cake, it works. But you bench on potatoes, it doesn't work. If you have French fries and then you bench, it doesn't do any good for the potatoes. All right, what is it? 9:15 already?
There's only,
9:13.
there's only the evidence on cake that you.
That's true, but there's no such evidence on potatoes. Let me summarize, since we have to dive in 2 minutes. If you had cake with the intent to have a meal immediately thereafter, you don't make a separate bracha
If they
achrona.
had cake,
If you had cake with that and then decided, you know what, I'm going to have a meal afterwards, so then you should make a
you
michya.
never make a bracha achrona. What would you make a bracha if you ate cake?
Right?
No, you got to be specific.
If you didn't have in
Ate
mind to eat the
cake
meal
at any
afterwards.
time,
You didn't have in mind to eat a meal
You
afterwards.
never make a bracha achrona.
No, if you didn't have him, you
Cake.
do.
Huh?
You do. If
You make a bracha.
yes. If you didn't have in mind to have a meal immediately thereafter, you make a bracha achrona.
You're only invited